Back, we're joined by two political heavyweights. Rick Davis, he's a former campaign manager for John McCain's 2008 presidential bid. And we also have my good friend and former U.S. Congressman from Tennessee and current Clinton supporter, Harold Ford Jr. Guys, thanks for coming in. First, let me start with you, Rick. Are we voting for Mr. Trump?
Well, I support Republican candidates and have throughout my entire career, going back to Ronald Reagan, who was my first president that I was able to vote for. And I will be voting Republican, but I don't necessarily vote for everybody on the ticket. So I will pick and choose along both the top of the ticket and all the way down to the bottom.
I want to get into a juicy story today. It was reported that Roger Ailes is working with Trump, advising him on his debate prep. The campaign has denied it. I'd love your guys' thoughts. Let's say this is true. Good or bad for Mr. Trump?
I don't think it could be bad for him. He probably could use some of any advice. The question is, will he take the advice? Roger Ailes has proven to be one of the most effective communicators. He leaves with some questions around his personal conduct, and I'll let that get litigated.
Well, but that's a big deal for a guy that is getting decimated by women, Rick. This guy who brings with him, obviously, a guy who just had to retire based on sexual harassment suits. As smart as this guy is, I don't know if I want that baggage. Rick, am I overreacting to that?
Well, I think people have to decide what they're going to do, right? I mean, if Roger Ailes is going to advise Donald Trump, he better say so, right? I mean, the worst thing you could possibly do is drip, drip, drip the story that, oh, they talked last week, or there was a phone call, or he's advising him, but he's not really advising him. I mean, you either take the hit and say, look, the guy's on my team, I stand by him, he's advising me, he's a smart guy, he built one of the most important networks of our time, or he's not advising him. It's one or the other, right? There's no real in-between in this business. But it's certainly not a presidential
But
politics.
Isn't this kind of indicative of the Trump campaign? I mean, this is how it's played itself out.
Well, normally, actually, there's a rotating group of advisors that come in, and then one group comes in, and they replace the ones that just got thrown out, and then they get recycled back in. Look, I think he ought to get advice from anybody he wants, right? I mean, I think that this is an important high-stakes race, and yet I think it's sort of what you said, Harold, is who's he going to listen to? Does he listen to anybody? I mean, I think this guy basically listens to his own conscience, what there is of it, and he makes decisions on the fly, right? It's whatever seems to hit him that moment, that day, whether it's in the written text or whether he's just making it up as he goes along. He was that way all during the debates in the Republican primary, and I think he's going to be that way in this debate. No matter what you say to that guy, when he hits that stage, he's making it up as he goes along.
One of your former partners, Paul Manafort, is an advisor to Donald Trump's campaign. In fact, he's the chairman. He's come under some scrutiny this week for work he's done in Russia and Ukraine. You've done work in Ukraine as well, correct?
I've not done any work in the Ukraine, but I've done work in Eastern Europe.
Yeah. Okay. What do you think of just the general question of scrutiny of the financial dealings of advisors and campaigns? Is that fair game for the media? And
well, I mean, media gets to decide what's fair game.
Well, but do you think that
in the 2008 campaign, I would say there was even more scrutiny.
There
right?
was.
I mean, I could not appoint anybody to our campaign who had ever been a lobbyist. You know, because at that time, the media scrutiny on lobbyists was such that they would find some client that you had that was, media fodder for the day's news. And so we had a number of advisors who, wound up having to leave our campaign in 2008 because of the history of clients that they had. In fact, I mean, Charlie Black and I were even subject of Barack Obama TV commercials in Northern Virginia about our history as lobbyists. So I would say it was much dicier for anybody who had ever spent any time in Washington making a living as a lobbyist than it is today.
As you've read, just one quick thought, as you've read about Paul Manafort's ties there, did anything there seem suspicious or questionable to you, the work
Well,
he's
I've
done?
learned a lot through the media. And look, I mean, he says that this was all pretty straightforward. Look, presidential politics has this incredible ability to turn on those Klieg lights and see right through to the skeleton, right? I mean, this is, the top of the sport. And so, look, he's got a distraction. He's got to figure out a way to either blow through that distraction or deal with it and try and knock it down. It'll be interesting to see which road they take because, the more you try to sort of manage the press on this front, the more it distracts you from the real goal, which is, getting Donald Trump elected.
Harold, do you think these issues matter to voters? Should they matter to voters? How an advisor made his money or her money?
Only because we're talking about Eastern Europe and talking about Russia will it have some currency or perhaps some relevance. If they're able to connect dots showing after Mr. Manafort said none of this was true, then it could have some impact. But I think ultimately most voters across the country, particularly in the Rust Belt and middle of the country, are going to look at these candidates, look at the policies, look at the temperament, look at who's most suited to be president, and that's what they'll make their decision on.